RuPaul, the drag queen who brought drag to the mainstream. But what does this mean for drag communities and the queer community at large? What does it mean for drag queens to be accepted in Hollywood? Shouldn't we all be happy for them? Hello, Chogma. For those who don't know me, my name is Kitty Contagion. I'm a Chickasaw. I'm Two-Spirit. I'm an anarchist. I'm a punk. And I'm a drag queen. And today we are going to talk about the Rupaulification of drag. As much as RuPaul is revered as being a hero for gay people, I haven't seen her wealth and fame and the wealth and fame of the queens who have become successful from the show trickle down to anyone else. What are the benefits of queer people being allowed to become successful capitalists by Hollywood media conglomerates? Why, despite the widespread claim that Drag Race has opened up the world for queer people, do I see the material conditions of queer people in the so-called United States get worse and worse, while RuPaul, World of Wonder, and the queens who have gained success from the show are richer than ever before? It's almost like a few select people from an oppressed group being able to assimilate and be successful under capitalism actually has nothing to do with liberation. It's almost like we're all being used as a resource to make the ruling class richer, but with a progress flag slapped on top. It's almost like we already have names for this thing: rainbow capitalism, assimilation politics. And who is at the center of that other than RuPaul himself? I want to talk about how capitalism takes our beautiful, diverse queer cultures and drains the life and radical ideas out of them. How it sucks them up and repackages them, spitting out a vapid, shallow, whitewashed husk littered with catchphrases and rainbow flags. The Rupaulification of drag. Listen, I highly doubt when RuPaul was starting out that she was saying to herself, oh my God, I totally can't wait to become a Hollywood sellout talking head. Like, I understand that she started out being Black and queer in the South in a small town where she wasn't accepted. But I'm not here to give a whole biography of RuPaul because there's a million articles and YouTube videos detailing her entire rags to riches story. The point of this video is not necessarily to tear down RuPaul, because her place could be taken by anyone. I want to talk about the role she plays in selling capitalism to queer people, and more specifically drag artists. Before you start to type out your nasty comment, please watch the video all the way through. No one is above criticism, and RuPaul is a disgustingly rich celebrity above all else. You don't know her, she doesn't know you, and she doesn't need you to defend her in my comment section. Thank you. RuPaul and Drag Race are only symptoms of larger problems. And these problems started way before RuPaul became famous. The problems I'm talking about are rainbow capitalism, liberal representation politics, and the commodification of the art of drag. And I'll be the first to say that I, too, am a queer trans artist attempting to survive capitalism off of my art. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that, because we're all just trying to get along. And when you are an artist, sometimes the only way that feels like you can live is to try to make a living off of art. So I totally understand why people want to do that. I'm trying to do it too. What I take issue with is when it starts to become extractive and individualistic. When people start drag just because they want to be popular, famous, and make money. In the words of Ocean Aqua Black from season 2 of Canada's Drag Race, the stage, once a sacred place of expression and creative sweat, sometimes becomes a mere podium for poorly disguised egos. As queer people, as drag artists, as artists in general, We need each other to be able to survive. But I think through Drag Race and our own capitalistic brainwashing, our expectations of what drag is supposed to be and what it means to be a successful drag artist have become very narrow. I take issue with our art careers becoming more important than attacking capitalism. I take issue with the idea that a TV show and a few people becoming celebrities is somehow leading queer people towards liberation. I take issue with the idea that RuPaul is the face of drag and that Drag Race gets to call the shots on what drag is and how drag artists can succeed. It feels like drag shows aren't a way to become more close-knit as queer people, even though I know that that's like a popular narrative. In my experience, that's not really what it feels like. It feels like more of a space of competition. Everyone is trying to be famous. Everyone's trying to be popular. And there just seems to be more of a focus on if you're working towards getting onto a popular drag TV show rather than just like working on your art. It's like Ocean said, the stage, once a sacred place of expression and creative sweat, sometimes becomes a mere podium for poorly disguised egos. I do think that because of Drag Race, the art of drag is becoming oversaturated and watered down. And that's not even to discourage people from starting drag if they want to do drag, but I think that a lot of people need to reevaluate why they want to do drag. I'm not even trying to discount the rich history of drag competitions here, but if we take like the historical ballroom scene, for example, the people participating in those pageants, like everything was connected outside of the ball as well. Like people took care of each other because it was necessary. Ballroom was a direct response to the vapid whiteness of the pageant scene of the time. They fought for liberation together and took to the streets together. Now it seems like all this has kind of withered away in mainstream drag scenes in favor of focusing only on competitiveness and trying to climb the ladder to fame. I'm not a part of the current ballroom scene, so I can't be an authority on that because that's very much a culture that you are like initiated into, and all of my knowledge is from the outside, so I don't want to speak on modern ballroom. But based on what I do know, it definitely seems to be a lot more family and community oriented than modern drag scenes. Anyway, to once again quote Ocean Aqua Black's Instagram post, simply donning a wig is no longer enough to proclaim yourself an artist. And this has been a long-standing problem. Given that queer spaces were and still are in a lot of ways racially segregated, and that white queer people have a glaring history of being apolitical beyond what serves their interests, I would argue that this new level of competitiveness is a direct result of RuPaul's Drag Race. Drag Race is modeled after ballroom, with its categories, runways, and vernacular, but it lacks the politics to back it up. Instead, the radical liberation politics of ballroom are appropriated and replaced with a focus on liberal assimilation politics, which urge queer people to participate in capitalism in order to have our voices heard. And even then, the politics of the show are extremely flimsy and even arguably non-existent, with Ru's history of not addressing the racism that queens have faced from not only the other contestants, but also from fans of the show. And of course, the infamous transphobic remarks that she made about trans women and people of all gender expanses and drag expanses participating on the show. She may have tweeted a half-assed apology after she got backlash from these comments, but she should know better, and to me that indicates that the damage was already done. Drag Race is a huge success, and as much as it is touted as bringing so much acceptance to society, this isn't really something that I see happening at a structural level when it comes to queer people actually having better lives, especially Black and other colonized queer people. In short, Drag Race may help people on an individual level, and I'm not trying to discount that. It definitely provides entertainment, mainly for a cishet audience, but ultimately it is useless when it comes to trans and queer liberation, and it's an active participant in the pacification of radical queer politics. Drag Race is the epitome of representation politics. If you're not familiar with representation politics, then I want to take a closer look at that so we're all on the same page. In the 2014 essay, Toward the Queerest Insurrection, author Mary Nardini Gang tackles the issues with the assimilation of queer people into capitalist society. Gang says that if history proves anything, it is that capitalism has a treacherous, recuperative tendency to pacify radical social movements. It works rather simply, actually. A group gains privilege and power within a movement, and shortly thereafter sells their comrades out. Just like with Star, the street transvestite action revolutionaries, and how Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were betrayed by people they thought were their allies, this is exactly what we see happening with RuPaul's Drag Race and the legacy of drag in general. I recommend checking out this release by Unterelli Press on the Anarchist Library, which I'll link in the description below to learn more about Marsha, Sylvia, and Star. If you watch sketches and interviews with RuPaul before her rise to fame, she seems so much more authentic than the icy veneer and unblinking eyes that we see now and like make memes about. In a famous video where she's interviewing trans sex workers walking the street in the meatpacking district in New York, she says, "I see myself in each one of them." As many of us know, trans women, especially Black and other colonized trans women, are often forced into sex work professions in order to survive due to society's hostility towards trans women. Before Drag Race, it is evident that Ru identifies with these women at least somewhat. She understands what it means to be Black and gender variant in a colonial society, or at least she makes a show of appearing that way. But years later, with Drag Race finally being a huge success, she makes these disparaging remarks about trans women participating in the show, which is extremely rich considering her show and drag culture as we know it wouldn't even exist without the Black trans women Ru once claimed to see herself in. It's just like Gang said, when Ru was given even an ounce of power that she built through proximity to ballroom culture and the underground drag scene, she threw them all under the bus in favor of assimilationist politics that would make her rich, while Black trans women are still forced into sex work to survive. This is the danger of representation politics. RuPaul is heralded as the face of drag, even the face of the queer community in mainstream media. RuPaul is accepted in Hollywood and has led the way for other drag queens to be successful in Hollywood and elsewhere in the entertainment industry. Finally, queer people are becoming more accepted and less oppressed because there are drag queens in Hollywood. Well, actually, no. Many queer and trans feminist theorists have asked and answered this question over the years. Does representation and visibility really equal safety, change, and liberation? Black trans feminist theorist Enisambu Zasuakama says no. In her essay, Femme Queen, Warrior Queen, Suakama discusses the pitfalls of visibility and representation of Black and other colonized trans women. She says, "It serves the capitalists to throw Black trans women and trans femmes under the bus. Transmisogynoir is a fascist and imperialist strategy. From that perspective, we must assume that the recent waves of visibility given to some of the girls is not liberation, but a bourgeois project. The murders of Black trans women and trans femmes are becoming hypervisible only because of a certain profit-oriented version of centering that makes a resource out of us and our histories for others' gain." Here she is addressing that because capitalism and imperialism hinge on anti-Blackness, specifically transmisogynoir, the only conclusion that can be drawn from recent visibility and representation of Black trans women is that it is profitable to turn the culture and history of Black trans women into resources. It is especially profitable to turn the pain, suffering, and deaths of Black trans women into resources. While visibility and representation seem like progress on the surface, it's really an advanced form of objectification and fetishization. If the culture and history of Black trans women is an extractable resource, then the value of Black trans women only goes so far as to what they can do and provide for others. Drag Race is guilty of this fetishization and extraction on many counts. The contributions of Black trans women to queer liberation movements, ballroom, and drag are only valued insofar as they can get views and money for the producers of Drag Race. How many times has Marsha P. Johnson's name been mentioned on the show in order for Rue to make some point about how queer people need to be grateful that they can participate in Hollywood reality TV for money, or how progressive it is for queer people to be able to participate in so-called American democracy? Marsha is put on a pedestal as an advocate for our rights, yet the true radical nature of her politics is never discussed. In her own words, Marsha believed in picking up the gun and starting a revolution if necessary. She was primarily concerned with queer and trans people experiencing homelessness and being harassed by the police and subsequently thrown in jail. In order for capitalism to function, racism and cis-heteropatriarchy are required. It used to be that queer people were queer because we disrupted the hegemony of capitalism and thereby the racist structure of patriarchy. But because of things like rainbow capitalism, assimilation, drag race, and white queer people making little progress when it comes to checking their racism, unfortunately, it's just no longer true, if it ever was. It's popular and fun and profitable to talk about clocking someone's tea, but the underlying radical politics that form these cultures are not so profitable and palatable, and thus are discarded along with the women who formed them. Even on an individual level, white and non-Black queens are able to base their whole personalities around ballroom vernacular and emulating Black trans feminine queerness because it's profitable, while they exclude and hurl aggression at the Black queens in their communities. Marsha P. Johnson was murdered. It was a cold case that was never solved because no one cared except for those closest to her. It was ruled a suicide, but that was only revoked because someone who was close to her cared about her enough to at least have her death be labeled as the murder that it was. She's valorized as a hero today. Her name used and extracted for whatever narrative is being pushed at the time, while her real life experiences and radical politics are discarded. She gets streets named after her and name dropped on Drag Race, but her politics of being at war with capitalist society are conveniently forgotten in favor of something that would look much better on an Instagram infographic. Even in death, she is denied agency and used and abused by the very same people who claim to love her. This is the cruel violence of representation politics. Capitalism will extract everything it can from radical queer social movements and then sell it back to us to make a quick buck. And we eat it up every time, spewing the exact same bullshit that the capitalists want us to. RuPaul is no different. While the material conditions of queer people in the so-called United States worsen, Drag Race is more popular than ever. Didn't that mean that queer people on a structural level would be reaping the benefits of Drag Race's success? Maybe, if representation actually did anything to change things on a structural and material level. But that's impossible. By definition, when marginalized groups focus on being represented within the society that is built around oppressing them, it is actually reinforcing the authority of said society. They're not tearing it down or changing it, but assimilating into it. And capitalism can co-opt and morph and change itself to accommodate these small representations and reforms that ultimately do nothing to challenge the status quo or threaten its authority. Suddenly, when mainly white queer people are a little bit more comfortable in American society, they no longer want the end of capitalism, but instead are focused on if they have the so-called right to join the military or run for office so they can take part in the murder and oppression of other queer people around the world. All in the name of representation. Once again, Mary Nardini Gang's observations are true. A few queer people got an ounce of power and used it to sell everyone else out. And the most marginalized get told that they should be grateful to see queer people wielding the weapons of the oppressor. But Kitty, Drag Race has made it so much easier for drag artists to make a living off of doing drag. This is objectively good for the community. For those particular artists who are able to make that living, maybe. But for most of us, that's never going to be the reality. And why would we want that anyway? I care much more about the liberation of queer people and the end of capitalism than I do about a couple dozen queens who are able to leverage drag to make capitalism work for them. Even queens who have made it big still feel as though their stories, experiences, and artistry were exploited by Drag Race for profit. And this is a well-known and accepted fact. According to Maddie Morphosis, the queens make just $500 per episode. RuPaul's net worth is $60 million. And the annual revenue of World of Wonder is $123 million per year, for reference. Many queens go into debt in order to purchase their package to compete on the show, from which they are guaranteed absolutely nothing other than $500 per episode and exposure. In her interview with Maddie Morphosis on Give It To Me Straight, Tammy Brown describes the conditions on set and the lack of fair compensation as abuse. Evie Oddly, the winner of season 11, posted a Twitter thread describing the horrible conditions on set, the lack of fair treatment, and even how despite her win, World of Wonder took over a year to pay her the $100,000 prize money. And it shouldn't be lost on anyone that this happened to a queen who is Black and disabled. Evie says that the queens are the lifeblood of what makes the show great, and yet their artistry is being extracted and exploited by the producers. She says, then they tell themselves they're good people for showcasing queer content and creating opportunities for us while ignoring the irreparable damage they cause and creating a chokehold monopoly on how drag artists can succeed. She correctly observes that despite the fact that the queens are the reason that people are watching, they are treated like animals on set, sleep-deprived, depressed, and drastically underpaid for their contributions to the cultural phenomenon. The queens are nothing more than a resource for World of Wonder and RuPaul to exploit. When their stories of strife have been filmed, they get tossed out, being told they should be thankful for the exposure. Former contestant Monica Beverly Hills said in a 2018 interview, "I've talked before about having been a sex worker and escorting as a means for survival and to help pay for my transition. Drag Race helped me escape that world, but their world was never really made for me either. Let's be real. Once I came out as trans, they milked that moment, and then I didn't stick around much longer." Here, Suakama's observation that Black trans women are only valuable insofar as providing inspiration rings true. Monica was able to escape survival sex work because of Drag Race. It was still at the cost of her life experience being exploited for profit. Her trauma was put on display for consumption by hungry, fetishizing viewers. Her visibility was highly profitable and made for good TV. Though her life has changed for the better, the material reality of Black trans women remains more or less the same at the systemic level, where they are forced to compete for resources that may or may not propel them out of their circumstances that they are in by design of colonial society. Outside of the queens who have made it big, on a local level, I see drag artists constantly struggling with finances, housing, keeping a job, the same bullshit that queer people have dealt with for centuries in this failed colonial project of a country. The queens who have made it have the queens who haven't focused on maybe one day that could be me, instead of, wow, as queer and trans people, we are oppressed by this society, and in order to be liberated, this society must be overthrown. It's the same bullshit as your average corporate Joe looking at the millionaire CEO of the company he works for and thinking, wow, maybe one day I'll be as rich and powerful as him. It's the same bullshit as wanting to be a cop because you want to change the system from the inside. Drag artists aspiring to be capitalists is a dead-end street that throws the most marginalized in our communities under the bus. Through RuPaul's Drag Race, the art and practice of drag has pacified its origins, rooted in mutual aid, community self-defense, and resisting the domination of capitalist society, into a marketable commodity that allows some queer people to become successful capitalists. While this is great for the few queens who have become wealthy from the show, when we look around, we see all the same issues that Sylvia and Marsha fought against, still plaguing the queer community: racism, poverty, violence of all kinds. For those who refuse to assimilate, or for those who can't, material conditions in the queer community have hardly changed, and another spin-off of Drag Race isn't going to save any of us. Before anyone comes for me and says, why can't you just let us enjoy things? Please consider for a moment that you need to be critically engaging with every piece of media that you consume, even if it's just for fun. In the so-called United States, everything that we consume from Hollywood media conglomerates needs to be considered propaganda and treated as such. I know all about Drag Race. I've seen almost every season, but that doesn't mean I can't see the sinister workings of co-optation and assimilation lurking beneath. I have thought critically enough to know that while Drag Race can be entertaining, it ultimately doesn't do anything to advance the liberation of queer people. RuPaul is not my hero, and she shouldn't be yours. She is a capitalist, and she's probably made money off of you, just like she makes money off of the destruction of the precious land that we live on. Whether she'll ever acknowledge it or not, she sees us queer people as a resource that makes her rich and powerful while we wonder how we're going to pay our bills or have enough gas to make it to our next gig. We have to stop fooling ourselves into thinking that representation is going to save us, and instead learn to defend our communities and attack our oppressor. It is easy to see by taking a look at what is happening around us that it is necessary. We need to reject this capitalist brainwashing that has us all competing for resources. I'm not someone who claims to have all the answers. These are just conclusions that I come to from knowledge of history and witnessing the real life experiences of the queer people around me. This country is built and operates on slavery, genocide, and the destruction of Mother Earth. There is no reforming a society that is hell-bent on causing the extinction of not just us, but of the entire human race. If we want to live, we need to reject this society by any means necessary. Stop aspiring to fame and start aspiring to making art that inspires you and your fellow queers to take action against oppression. I've linked all the sources I used for this video in the description. I recommend reading these texts in their entirety. We need to educate ourselves and each other. We are all we have. This is life and death. And for the most oppressed in our society, it always has been.